Okay, we're going to start getting people into the room for our webinar.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, we have Hilke here already, ready to charge. Let's just, yeah, we're just going to wait for our attendees. I know there's been a lot of excitement and interest in this topic, very topical. Conversation with a renowned journalist and the author. We're really looking forward to an energizing discussion. And I also secretly hope, Hilke, that you are going to be able to answer all of our questions about
Let's see. I'm not an
the,
IO psychologist, so I'll
yeah,
try my best.
yeah, you don't have to be, you do your investigations. That's what's important. All right, so we're going to give it just a couple more minutes. And in the meantime, for those of you who do not know who I am and our series, I just want you to, I want again to say hello. I'm Anna Tavis, Department Chair for Human Capital Management Programs, where we are really on the cutting edge of where HR is going, very applied, very future workforce focused. And we are really raising, the awareness about some of those issues that, we invited Hilke to help us with today. So delighted to see our faculty. I see Mary Ciani here. I see Sherry Feinsick. I see Carol Russo. As well as amazing students of ours. I mean, I can't name all of you, but thank you for joining. And without further ado, let me make a very special introduction to Hilke. So if you haven't seen Hilke's website, please go ahead and do that. Connect with her on LinkedIn. Because she's, as a journalist, she's really, really great, communicating her thoughts, her publications, etc. But let me do the official intro to this conversation. So Hilke is an Emmy-award winning investigative reporter. At the same time, she's a colleague of ours, assistant professor of journalism at NYU, and a contributor to major publications such as the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian. I personally first read about her book in the Financial Times, which is a European publication, and Hilke writes about issues of the workplace, and most recently has gone on this journey of looking into deep under the hood of artificial intelligence, especially as it applies to the practices in our profession, in HR, human resource management. And the book, as you know, is called The Algorithm: How AI Decides Who Gets Hired, Monitored, Promoted, and Fired. Very current conversation. How do people get fired, especially today? And why? And this is the question that we will be asking Hilke today, why we need to fight back. And we'll start with awareness. By the way, everyone on this podcast, on this webinar, will get a discount of 20% off Hilke's book that is going to be sent to you through the follow-up with a recording of this webinar, as well as additional information on how to get in touch with Hilke. So Hilke, before we get there, tell us about the role of investigative journalism and why this is such an important profession today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start, but like first of all, thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I'm excited to hear all of the questions, and please, you can be as harsh or pushy as you want to. I really do want to, I think challenging research finding is really, really important. But for me, investigative journalism is like, we always talk about holding the powerful accountable, talking to people who, who have felt issues in the world and maybe have not had a voice. And I do feel like with this investigation, I sort of always feel like you need to broaden what investigative journalism does. It's like we need to also think about algorithms because they also are now powerful, right, and make decisions on human beings. So we need to interrogate, investigate them as much as we do powerful people. And so, we often think about like in investigative journalism, we talk about like systemic problems that like a system is supposed to work like this, but maybe in reality it works more like this. And we sort of point out the discrepancy. And I think that's what I did mostly in the book too, right? Like vendors and companies who use AI in hiring or algorithms, right? Some of them are not AI, they're just like algorithmic solutions. Talk about that, this will like democratize hiring, it's bias free, it finds the best people, it will be more efficient, it will be save labor costs to a lot of companies. And, that's how they wish it works. And I sort of maybe uncovered that that is not always the case. And actually, sometimes we see some really troublesome outcomes to some of these tools.
Yeah, fantastic. That's exactly what we need to cover today. So tell us, how you got started, and what were kind of surprises along the way, and maybe a little bit outline kind of the milestones of your insights.
Yeah, yeah,
How
because it's been a journey of myself too. So I started this, so I should give people maybe a little bit of background. So I'm actually not a tech reporter. I really haven't reported on tech, although I've been with the Wall Street Journal is my long-term home base, but I was like a multimedia New York reporter. I was doing videos, but I wasn't reporting on tech. And I actually left the Wall Street Journal in 2013 because I had done a documentary on sexual assault in Pakistan that went to Sundance and went to Frontline. So that was usually my stories. I told like stories of systematic problems for human beings and, had more of a social justice bent. But in 2017, I was at a conference with consumer lawyers in DC. It had nothing to do with big data or algorithm or HR or anything. And I needed a ride from the conference to Union Station to take a train back to New York. And I called myself a Lyft, kind of like an Uber rideshare app. And I got into the car and I asked the driver how he is. So, how's your day going? He's like, I had a weird day. I don't think I've ever had a driver say that. And I was like, oh yeah, what happened? He's like, I had a job interview with a robot. And I was like, what? Job interview with a robot? I'm curious, nosy journalist. So I wanted to know more. And, he was like generously sharing his story that he had applied for a baggage handler position at a local airport and he got a call. And he called the robot, probably there were pre-recorded questions, right? He got a phone call that day asking him 3 questions. And he was just really like, it clearly made an impact on him, right? And this was like the early days of sort of algorithmic tools in hiring. I had never heard of it. So I made a note and was like, okay, robot job interviews, I need to look into it. And, maybe I forgotten about it. But like a few months later, my colleague Meredith Broussard, who actually also does, investigates AI, was like, there's a conference at NYU and I'm speaking and you should come. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's close by, I'll go. And it turned out there was a panelist with somebody who had just left the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And she was talking about that there are very basic algorithms that companies use. So that in 2016, the EEOC had done like a big data hearing and had done, so some fact finding. And she was really concerned that algorithmic tools are being used by employers to like go through people's calendar and check how long people are at work or how long they're absent. And she was really worried that caregivers, which are mostly mothers in this country, and people with disabilities have longer absentee times and they might get discriminated against, right? They might get fired or reprimanded in the workplace because they have fewer hours at their desk and that they're protected classes. So she thought this would be really something problematic. And she also talked about HireVue, one of the companies that was doing facial expression analysis. And, I looked around, there was like almost no one in this panel. There was no journalist. And I was like, well, it seems like this is a big deal. Someone needs to look into it. So then I talked to Ben Taylor, who's the former chief data scientist at HireVue, and I maybe understood 1 or 2% of what he was talking about, like what HireVue was doing and how this facial expression analysis works. But he told me to go to SIOP, the Society of Industrial and Organizational, their annual conference, and that's what I went in April. So like 6 months after I got the sort of initial tip. This was in early 2018, and already there were so many panels about AI. There were so many companies that were advertising in sort of the marketplace, and I was like, wow, there's no journalist here, and this is really changing the industry. And when I first saw the facial emotional analysis that HireVue was showing, I was like, whoa, maybe we cracked the code. Maybe we superseded unconscious bias in hiring, because this is really something. Like maybe the AI tools did find something that humans never could, and this will revolutionize the field. So I think I have a 2-minute piece, because I did a piece on this for the Wall Street Journal that was sort of the beginning, to sort of understand what goes on inside the hood, under the hood, that I think might be really helpful.
That would be phenomenal. And by the way, I was at the same conference at SIOP. I didn't see you.
Oh, yeah.
I remember
There
that
are many people. It is,
yeah. No, it's a good one. It's a good one. And
yeah,
they were
it's
very good with psychologists. Yeah, we were all looking at it, but somewhat differently from your point of view. Yep.
Yeah. So let me show everyone what I found, and I can talk a little bit about what then happened to the technology. But
We begin our exploration of the new world of hiring with a visit to the headquarters of one of the companies that's pushing the envelope, HireVue. Its artificial intelligence assessment tool is used by over 50 companies, including Unilever and Hilton, which both declined to comment. This, I'm told, is a typical digital interview for someone applying to become a customer service rep. It confronts me with several scenarios that, on the job, I might encounter.
If you can't help me resolve this right now, I'm going to take my business elsewhere.
I'm here to try to make things better. I go into this knowing something that HireVue acknowledges many job candidates potentially do not. That my responses are being assessed not by human beings, but by AI, analyzing my tone of voice, the clusters of words I use, and my micro expressions. So here's what's wild to me. The notion of micro expressions, is that what you're calling them?
It's the facial analysis software. It's capturing, if you think of facial movement, smiling, frowning, eyebrow movement, those are actual database points, and they roll together to give certain emotions and traits and personality and thinking style things.
Here I am.
Yeah.
I just did the interview for a job as a customer support representative. How'd I do?
The first thing is we look at the AI score that's attached to it, and you can see that up here, you scored it at 37%.
That's pretty good, right?
No, that's out of 100, right? So you're kind of in the bottom third, if you will, in that job, so you'd be a low match, essentially. My rating is the result of HireVue's AI comparing my responses to those of actual employees. Essentially, my performance is being compared. My voice, my words, my facial expressions against a company's highest performers. So you think if an employer were to see that number, would I be written off most likely? Would it be filtered out of the process completely? No, absolutely not, actually. What we would recommend is that the candidates could be rank ordered by that, but they still go and look at the different videos. So you're telling me that everybody who goes through this, they get seen by someone? Can be. They want to watch all.
So I'm going to stop it here. But you sort of get a sense how this, in 2018, how HireVue software worked. And, it really felt like this was a revolution here. And, just to give everyone a sense of the scope, like in November 2022, HireVue released a press release saying they just did their 30 millionth interview. And somebody did the math on LinkedIn and was like, I looked at all the different press releases. So they're doing about 100,000 video interviews a day, not all with AI. Some of the, the HireVue has two products. One is just a same thing, a video interview, and then customers can also choose to have AI do the scoring. And the company has not released how many of those 30 million or how many millions it's now, how many of those a percentage of AI tools or not. But we know that some companies at the time used it, and later Delta Airlines used the AI tool to hire flight attendants. And but the company isn't necessarily like the forthcoming which company uses what. But I think you sort of get a sense, like I was just blown away by that, and I was like, okay, this is like really something new. And then I started digging for the Wall Street Journal and, talk to experts, what we do. It was like pretty quickly was clear that like there isn't a whole lot of science backing this idea up. Like we don't have science what facial expressions you need in a job interview to be successful in the job. And we really don't have science to check what facial expressions you need in a job interview that infers how successful you're going to be. And when I talked to Lisa Feldman Barrett at, I think she's at always get it confused, Northwestern or Northeastern, sorry, Lisa. She talked about, she is a psychologist who studied emotions for decades. And she said the old theory that's built into this effective computing tools that look at like happiness, so infer from like a smile that you're happy, or from a frown brow that maybe you were upset or angry, that is the idea that we all have universal emotions is outdated. So there is a likelihood that people from similar cultures, from similar places have similar facial expressions and feelings, but not all, and certainly not across cultures. So, and I think, I think we all have that, right? That like, I have had many job interviews where I smiled and I certainly was not happy, but a computer would infer that I was happy, right? So there's a whole lot of misses that can happen here. So, that seems to be a really problematic application. And the way it's calibrated is that the tool is built on video interviews of current employees, a bunch of them, and was built on that. And so whatever facial expressions they had and whatever intonation of voices they had and what voices that they used for specific answers, me as a job seeker would be compared to that. I did a piece in the Wall Street Journal. Drew Harville did another piece a year later in the Washington Post, and there was an epic complaint with the FTC looking at like this might be false advertising. HireVue stopped using the facial expression analysis, phased it out, and later also phased out the intonation of voices. When I started this journey, I was like really hopeful and very interested, and and I did find that I think some of the applications of the technology could be really problematic in this case, right? Like that emotion recognitions might actually not find anything or find some random stuff. And I think I just saw in the chat that somebody said that, these are horrible experiences. And actually that was kind of interesting too, that a lot of job seekers I had talked to who had done HireVue interviews weren't so fond of it. Like there was maybe like every 10th or so was like, it's fine. And, I could schedule it when I wanted to. And I like that part of the experience. But most people sort of were like, this was like so inhumane. I couldn't ask questions, right? There's no one on the other side. But I understand that they're very efficient and labor, save a lot of labor costs for companies. So they want to do it, especially in, we see this often in like retail positions, right? Fast food and like a lot of hourly high demand jobs that have to constantly hire. That's how the journey started. And then I started looking deeper into some other tools and found some other surprising things that, I thought AI was like solving all these problems. And it turns out that it often just maybe replicated the bias that we already have. I can give some more examples or, yeah.
Please put your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. Hilke, is this a function of just the evolution of the technology? Is it too early to write it off? And could we say, along with the science, we're, developing a much deeper understanding of emotions even. We started out at one place thinking there are universal emotions that could be captured analytically. But along with the science, we will continue to develop the tools. So the concern here could be if we go all the way, and I think that's a discussion that's currently going on between Europe and the US, for example, where the Europeans are ahead of the US in regulations and government guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. And the debate going on the US side is, yes, we can put all of these regulations in place, but then we're going to stifle the development of innovation and kind of probing into the potential of technology that actually can help humans who are inherently biased. We know this.
Yeah. And I don't want to go back to that, right? Like, I want to
Yeah.
be very clear that I've studied the unconscious bias of humans, and we're horrible at hiring. Like, if we're hungry, we hire differently, right? If somebody went to the same school with us, we hire differently. And I do think that, like, one-way video interviews have sort of brought the idea of structured interviewing, that you ask the same questions to everyone and don't have chit chat. Like, I think that is really actually helpful to reduce bias and when humans get involved. But I don't want to go back to humans, but I do actually think that, like, my optimism has been certainly dampered, and I'm usually also not somebody who, like, would put myself on the optimism or not side, like, because I'm neither or. Like, what I'm interested in is, like, what are the facts on the ground? Like, how do we use these tools? What happens to job seekers? And what are some places where we have reduced bias, and maybe where we have found bias? Like, I'm sort of interested, like, what's actually happening on the ground. And I think that's what we should care about, and sort of, like, think less about, like, oh, is this stifling innovation or not? I mean, I don't want it to, but I also don't want the idea, and I think we may have seen this, it might be too overgeneralizing, but maybe this is the first generation of these tools. We've seen a lot of misfires,
Yes.
and that's not a good way to judge and quantify human beings, right? And the idea is, like, to me, why I think this matters is, like, and I think we have sort of sometimes not seen this. We've certainly seen facial recognition and other technology that people have criticized and really thought about. I think hiring and sort of monitoring at work is, like, fell off because it's like we often don't really see it. All the job seekers I've talked to had no idea that AI may have been involved in hiring them. And I think also, like, it just feels normal that we get rejected, right? But I do think it's, like, a really high stakes environment. Like, it matters if I get the job. Like, matters that I can feed myself and my children. And it does matter. Sort of personal happiness is really well connected to our jobs. And I think it matters if I don't get my dream job because I'm not the most qualified. But if I would find out it's a faulty algorithm that was built on not on scientific principles, but was very arbitrary and unclear how it made decisions, I would be absolutely devastated, and that would not feel fair. Another thing that I looked at is resume screeners that are pretty ubiquitous, right? Like, all of the big job platforms, LinkedIn and ZipRecruiter and all of those, use some form of AI, and they obviously sort of parse resumes or screen resumes and then rank them for recruiters, right? Because recruiters, they don't want to look at 20,000 resumes randomly in my inbox. I want to have them ranked, right? And I want to call the 50 best folks. And what I've learned from talking to a lot of employment lawyers and IO psychologists who maybe come in when a vendor pitches a tool, a company wants to buy the tool, and they do some due diligence, or maybe they have had running the tools, the tool for a little bit, and are sort of feeling like, is this working? They bring in folks to do due diligence. And I think what I found there is that some keywords were really problematic. So in one resume screener, the tool gave more points to people who had the word baseball on their resumes. It subtracted points for people who had the word softball on their resume. So that's clearly possibly a gender discrimination, right? Because in the US context, more men play and watch baseball, more women traditionally play softball. There's another as a resume screener that used Africa or African American as a keyword. locations like Syria and Canada, that could be discrimination based on national origin. There's one tool that found out that people whose name is Thomas is better at any job. So it's probably based on, resumes that were used to feed the tool, right? If you want, a lot of companies want to calibrate the tools to their company. So they're feeded resumes of people who are in the role or have been hired the last few years. And then the tool does a a correlation analysis, like it's just a statistical significant analysis. And maybe there were a bunch of Thomases in the pool. So the tool found out Thomas is a proxy for success, a variable for that. Obviously, I hope a human would understand that it's not, has nothing to do how qualified you are for the job and the ability and the skills that you have. Obviously, humans are also totally biased when it comes to first names on resumes, no question, but in a different way biased, right? And I think so like those are like really problematic applications of these tools. And when I talk to some of the employment lawyers, Matthew Scherer said, all of the tools he looked at were not ready for prime time. And IO psychologist John Scott said the 5 ones he looked at, they all had problematic variables. And the last one, why am I forgetting his name, who found the Africa and baseball and softball, he said about a quarter of the screeners he looked at had problematic keywords. But that's not one. That's like there's a lot what's going on under the hood. And I think, one of the problems is that a lot of companies use, or vendors use, deep neural networks where the training data that goes in and you can check the results, but you don't necessarily know how the decisions are being made. And that seems a little bit problematic in a high stakes environment, that you don't know exactly, you can't explain the AI. So I think that's very problematic. And that might have been the case here, right? Like, I don't, but that's probably what happened. We've seen this at Amazon as well, right? A few years back, they built a resume screener and that continuously learned to downgrade people with the word women or woman on their resume, same thing. Because, maybe this was to hire people into the higher echelons of the tech division where women were not hired, sort of traditionally, or fewer women were hired there. So they had a gender disparity, which was absolutely reflected in the algorithm. And I think the problem here is like you sort of now do it at scale. The human discrimination that we have in the first place, you now have it at scale, and the scope is just unprecedented. Like, Google told me they get about 3 million applications a year. IBM gets 5 million. Like, I mean, the numbers are staggering. I get it that the companies need a technological solution, but I also feel like, well, they need to be fair and, reduce bias and not bring in new bias and do this problem at scale. So I think a lot of the marketing language that vendors put out, that this is, I see this on the website all the time, this is bias free, this is, finding the most qualified candidate. We don't actually have evidence of that. I found the opposite. And, but I do think the tools make life for folks in HR functions so much more efficient, so much less labor intensive. It helps companies that they keep using these tools. And I also know that companies buy these tools to be more efficient. They don't want to hire the new people start monitoring these systems, right? Like, that is sort of not what they want this for. But I think we need to be a whole lot more skeptical about some of the claims in these tools.
Here's an approach. I think that we kind of graduated to the next level of conversation about these biases. The initial reaction was, yes, Amazon a few years ago, that's what they did, et cetera, et cetera. But even the EEOC commissioner, Keith Sunderling, who spoke at a number of our conferences, said, and so what do? We give it back to the biased humans. And in fact, some of the conversations around what there I found in the space of self-driving cars, that the humans actually commit a lot more, accidents on the road, driving, under intoxication and not following the road rules, not using seatbelts, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many more casualties on the road caused by human error. At the same time, we are a lot more generous to the humans than one accident. That's actually an argument that automatic car, self-driving cars makers are making, but if a self-driving car makes one mistake, then we're unforgiving about this. So is this just a question of, to me, that these algorithms, and you said they are scale multiplying the mistakes, but at the same time, if you think about what they're doing as a feedback to us, it's an opportunity for us to actually become a lot more aware of what we even do as humans, and
I
kind
think
of
that'd be great if there was a feedback loop. Like, I actually also think, like, I think somebody should test who is worse, humans or machines. I would love to do these tests and like long form or long-term studies. I would love to have companies that use maybe human hiring and also AI methods, and then follow the people that they labeled as yes, no, maybe hire also some of the no's that the AI labeled as no, or the humans hire it as no, and actually follow them for 3 years and see like what happens. But you have to do this at scale, right? Like 3 anecdotal people is not going to help. Like,
yeah,
if we don't have that evidence, like I would not suggest we upscale troubling methods. And I think what I'm also trying to say is like, well, maybe you should have a conversation. How should we hire and not just digitize and like sort of do methods that are actually not working, right? Like, we know that personality tests are have such a low validity of like 5 or 10% that, sort of to the inferring how good you're going to be at the role. Like, why are we using this as a screen to screen out humans if the validity is so low? Is this actually fair? And should we then build this into AI tools with like blue avatars or sort of games that then are also problematic for people with disabilities, for example? I think we should actually think about it. Like, how should we hire? And could we use some other tools? Like, if we say, oh, and I think what does strike me as a little bit problematic, that I think some of these AI tools sort of really circumvent a job analysis, where you really think through what are the skills, the needs, the capabilities that you need on this job, and then hire for that. We often now just copy the people that are in the job, and that could really find problematic things, where we just copy how most men behave. Because we use that. So I think what might be like a kind of interesting example is like looking at some of the games that I've played, because I think some of the stuff comes out of that. Let me just show a quick game here. I've recorded myself. So this is like a game that folks, this doesn't have any sound if you don't hear any sound. So this is a game that gets calibrated by having people who are currently in the role play the game. And the game says it finds like sort of how risk averse you are, or how much risk you want to take. It finds how much effort. It has 12 capabilities that it finds out, and it looks at like, okay, the people currently in the role, compared to the general population, maybe your 50 accountants are more risk takers. So that's a balloon game I played. Than the general population, and so job seekers then get compared to that. So one of the things that was kind of interesting when I pumped up balloons, first of all, and this is the same thing with hard task, easy task, I have to hit the space bar as fast as possible. When you're a job seeker, you sort of question like, what does it have to do with the job? Why do I have to hit the space bar as fast as possible? Why do I have to pump up balloons? I think that's one question. And then I was like, when I learned that the balloons check my propensity for risk behavior, I was like, well, maybe I'm like a maverick in video games and push the limits, but am I really a risk taker in real life? And then the real question is also, does risk taking have anything to do with the job? Or is it just something that it happens to be that the 50 accountants are risk takers, but is risk taking actually a real essential quality of the job? And I think we haven't really answered this. And the problem with the hard task and the keyboard thing is, when I played the test with somebody who has a disability, Henry Claypool, he was really worried. Like, he is quadriplegic, but he was really worried for folks who may have a motor disability, that they can't do this game and may get rejected. So there were a lot of questions. And I think Also, when I talked to another IO psychologist, like he was really worried that some game makers only compare the people who play the games to the general population. And he said, yeah, you also have to compare them to people who are unsuccessful in the job, to the general population, because he did that for a hospital. And when they looked at the successful nurses, they found out that compared to the general population, that hospital chain or something, they're more compassionate than the general population. So, you know, I as a layperson would think, oh, let's find people who have a nursing license and are very compassionate. But he said, well, it turns out when they looked at the unsuccessful folks in the job and compared them to the general population, they were also more compassionate than the general population. So actually, that wasn't the case why you should why people are successful in that given job. It happened to be conscientiousness. But I think those are all sort of things when we don't think through, okay, how are these tools built? What assumption built into this? How do they how people who not like us might be playing these tools or get subjected to them. I think there isn't a whole lot of thought put into those things. So I do think we need to really think through that.
Yeah, and I think that we started out there. I think there are more and more psychologists involved in these types of companies, even at a startup level. I'm seeing, at least among, you know, our profession, in our psychologists are joining. And unfortunately, to your point, research is always lagging behind the applications. But what the introduction of algorithms at this scale allows us to do is to accelerate the research. To your point, for us to actually look at the numbers that are going through the recruitment process at scale, as well as engage those unsuccessful candidates, you know, from the human perspective, it's not possible. No one researcher will be able to process this much information and this much data. However, I think that I see the value of algorithms, at least from my perspective, is that, again, they're revealing something about the humans. Yes, it's going at scale, and I agree with you that we need to be introducing fixes along the way rather than scaling at the first level of, you know, maturity. But at the same time, the need for research along with the innovators there, as well as people like yourself, you know, talking to the cab drivers and talking to, at scale again, to the experiences of people going through this process. I think we all need to be at the kind of input phase and a feedback, accelerate feedback to the developers about what we need and what's not working, because, you know, we kind of cite one type of bias, but as you've probably heard, the recent Google release, where they went all the way to in the other direction, where everyone had to be diversified. And when asked about a representation of the Nazis in Germany, they started coming up with a very diverse slate of the Nazis, which was
It's horrible. Yeah. I mean, you know, Nazis are not African-American.
Inaccurate. Yeah. So you could go overcorrect. I think that's what they realized, that they overcorrected. I have a few really amazing questions here.
I guess I think that should give us pause. And the question is, like, can we actually quantify seeing into the future and calculating if somebody's going to be more successful than others? You know, and can we actually build like social conventions, races as social conventions, right? So it's like I've reported for The Guardian on like raciness qualifiers in AI algorithms that like sort of purport to say this image is sexy or not. That seems a very social thing, that like you and I have different ideas, and like how on earth can we quantify that? So I think maybe that should tell us something, that some things cannot be automated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're going to find those boundaries. But to me, there's such a huge value in the feedback loop that we need to pay attention to. And I think one of the things, even about HireVue, because I also talked to some people who went through that process, And number one complaint was that they didn't get any feedback, that the rejections came without really understanding. I mean, in your video, that particular candidate was clearly explained by the person because it was a demo. But most candidates, especially at the jobs like a baggage handler, et cetera, they get no feedback, and people just keep getting rejected. And that's, I think, is a great opportunity if, along with the evaluations, people actually did get feedback and an explanation as to what happened there, where they could, and obviously this is where the liability comes in, and there could be an issue. So the question I have from one of our faculty, which is really, really important here, based on your research, do you have advice for our students here who are facing these tools in their job search, because we know that they are being used for better or worse?
Can you hear me right this second?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I do. So I think, this is like not, I didn't set out to sort of figure out, okay, what should we do to make hiring better, but I sort of learned some things along the way. So I think, I think resume screening is like super ubiquitous. So I think you need to have a machine readable tool, a resume. So like super short sentences, no two columns, no images, nothing like that. Also, like think about maybe not having your address on there. Also have a skills sections, because we see more and more companies looking for skills. I've also talked to recruiters who do, when they're in LinkedIn Recruiter, put in like, I'm looking for a software developer.
I don't have an answer for that. If there's something else I can.
Sorry, I've accidentally pressed stereo on my computer. So recruiters often put in like, I'm looking for a software developer in New York who needs to do Python and maybe Hadoop or something, like a skill. So you need to have to like clearly have them on your resume. And we also recommend, there's a couple of scanning tools on the internet that help job seekers, called JobScan and others, where you put in the job description and your resume, and it tells you how much overlap there's possibly is from the keywords on your resume. So you want to aim for like 60 to 80% overlap, not 100%, because some AI tools will throw you out because they think you duplicated the keywords. And I think there's also some problematic stuff that folks found out. For example, Joe Fuller, who's at Harvard, a professor, he did surveys of people in C-suites and in HR functions. And he found out that almost like when companies use AI tools or algorithmic tools, that almost half of them throw resumes out when they have a 6 months or longer job gap. So, and the resume sparse parser cannot be argued with. It will throw you out, and you're no longer in the running. So I think avoiding that is what folks should really do. And then the other thing is, we also know from these kinds of surveys that almost 90% of executives say, we know that well-qualified people get thrown out. But I guess we still use these tools. It's just an aside. But I think also, like, some people I've interviewed who have had hundreds of job applications were, even in the tech field, some of the most sought after professions, they also had to do a lot of interviews, and they said, you know what, I got interviews once I started contacting recruiters directly and just sent them a nice note that I applied, here's my resume, basically by hoping to bypass any AI screens. So I think that might be helpful tips for students. There's also, like, Google and a couple other companies have put up one-way video interview tools that you can train with to maybe have less anxiety. We don't know how necessarily the tools are calibrated. I can tell you from HireVue that folks get, if you have very short answers, that's a real problem for the algorithm, and you may not get adequately scored, or you get thrown out. So longer answers, like, giving more explanation is more helpful, to have more words there to be inferred upon.
Yeah. So as it sounds like to me, to summarize, is keep the human in the loop, continue to network as you are applying for these jobs, and try to understand how those algorithms are set up. To your point, there are some training tools, etc. Talk to others who have been interviewed by these same machines to understand how to basically hijack the conversation or take it in the right direction. The same thing as we've done, if you think about it, how many interview coaches are there who tell you how to go to a live interview with a live person, right? To make a good impression, etc. Another question, Hilke, here. Do you know, what are the companies that you looked at who could be, like the best practice so far? Or were there all bad, actors there, or there were some that gave you hope?
Oh, I should say, like, I don't actually think there are any bad actors. I actually think that everyone is trying to improve this. I just think that we had unintended consequences. That I do think that, like, all the vendors want to make hiring better. I think they just didn't necessarily look at sort of the consequences of their tools. And I think there is also, that's why I think there needs to be more aisles in the space and making in vendors, like sort of in vendors companies, but also in the companies that then buy the tools, is because we have this problem that, like, I think for a lot of data scientists, might be too generalizing, but it seems like correlation is causation. So if there is a correlation between two variables, then that is meaningful. When in reality, we know that we need to look like, well, are they actually causally connected? So obviously Thomas is not causally connected to be successful in any job, but it is a statistically significant finding that the algorithm had. So I think that would be a great intervention to check on that. And I think that would be really, really helpful. So I found some people who are more aware of some of the problems and showed me some of the tools. I haven't tested them, so I'm a little bit averse to actually say, oh, these are like great players in the field, because I didn't get access to all of the tools. So I mean, I think there's some, rather unproblematic applications. Like, I think a lot of HR stuff can be used with the chatbot. Like, I don't think you need a human to check how many vacation days I have left every 2 months. Like, that can absolutely be automated. Should you have a chatbot for sexual harassment claims? I hope not. I think there's like varying degree that, like, things can be absolutely automated. And in hiring too, I think there can be chatbots that can help people. And, there is like Eightfold and others who actually sort of expand some of the, I may apply to one job at a specific company, but the AI reads my skills and my capabilities and infers some of them as well. And then says, well, you're applying for this job, but have you looked at these other 10 jobs? I think that's great. Those are great applications. But I think once we start screening and rejecting people, we have to be a whole lot more sensible what we are doing. And, if the vendors themselves don't know what exactly they're scoring on, that seems particularly problematic, because we can check the results, but most companies do a 4/5 rule analysis, like, do men and women go through the assessment at somewhat comparable rates? Like, if 100% men go through, 80% of women have to go through, and they look at the different racial categories. But I've seen that actually in some of the audits, some of the tools actually did not pass an intersectionality audit. So where you so maybe compare white men versus Black women. It's not necessarily mandated by the EEOC, but I think it would be absolutely fair and ethical to do this kind of analysis, but we're not doing this. Are we doing an analysis of people with disabilities, how often they go through the tool? No, we don't. So I think there are other categories that, age, do we test for age? No, we don't. So I think, so there's one thing to check, like, is the tool letting people through? But then there's a second question, well, is the tool actually valid? Does it measure something that's actually related to the job? A 4/5 rule does not, 4/5 rule analysis does not actually check for that. But I think it's a sort of rule of thumb in the United States now that if you check for that, possibly the EEOC is not going to take a closer look, right? And you may not face an investigation.
Yeah, and I actually do have examples of our own students who applied for one job, were rejected, but eventually the recruiters got back to them because they were a good fit for another job.
Right. Yeah.
By virtue of that resume being in the system, which is not possible oftentimes with the human recruitment. There's only as much as you could retain. You know, how many times we say, oh, we'll keep your resume on file. Have we heard that, expression before, right? Which means to us is a polite way to say, no, you're rejected. But in this particular case, yes, we keep it on file, and the algorithm keeps going back to it for the right fit for the company. So, and I've heard that from big employers as well. So
yeah, and I think, it's sort of the silver star people. I think that's great. Like the people who just closely missed maybe the mark and weren't hired, like I think to keep them on file or to keep them in the algorithm, and it can re-up people the next time there's an opening. I think that's totally great use.
yeah.
I mean, the algorithm is actually valid. That's sort of the
So tell us, what are you thinking of doing next? Now that algorithm is out, everyone is discussing it, kind of the pros and cons. We identified, where the opportunities are for us to improve. I think it's very clear from this presentation that you are not totally, in the doomsday, denying the value of these tools. What do you want? What will you personally be looking for next?
Yeah. So I think there's I'm so super fascinated, I'm super fascinated by this idea. How do we quantify humans? So I think there is something to be done that we see a lot now that like HireVue and others do, is like sort of using the words that we say to infer how well qualified we are for a job. And we see this too about personality analysis, right? Like that it takes like the words that I write on Twitter and LinkedIn. And we've done actually a sample study on that, a larger sample study, and those AI tools do not work. They're very brittle and they collapse on impact. But I'm sort of interested in this other idea of like, okay, the words that I use in a job interview, are they actually predictive? Like what's the science underneath? I think it's utterly fascinating to describe these capabilities and adaptabilities. And then while I was writing the book, I was sort of like thinking about what are some solutions here? So there's like more transparency, explainability. There can be government guardrails, but there isn't a whole lot of political climate in this country to do so. Some people actually want like a pre-license of some of these tools, that you have to show no harm before you put these into the marketplace. I think that would, that's a great hope. I don't think that's realistic. But let's talk about like, I know people do research on like lesser harmful algorithms. What I want to do is I was like, okay, I think one problem is that a lot of vendors have to get their products to market quickly because they need to make the money back from investors. So there isn't necessarily a whole lot of time to do longitudinal studies like we do with vaccines or medications, right? To actually prove, do they work? And are they better than what we already have? So I think maybe we can do that for companies. So if companies want to do this in like a university study, I would be all for it. I find the right people to do this, and I think that would be great for humanity. And then the other thing is like, I also think I'm thinking about like starting to, I've already worked with computer scientists and others, like, well, let's try to build these tools in the public interest. Can we build a resume screener that doesn't rely on biased keywords? Well, let's build it. And let's also maybe show the 50,000 different ways we tried it and it didn't work. And if it works, let's put that on GitHub and in the public interest to sort of maybe show people, okay, this is the way that you could possibly do it. This is the way we did it. And here's how. And maybe that will put pressure on companies to sort of ask vendors like, well, did you do it this way? Like, how did you do it? Like, can we build better examples? And can we like sort of think through like, how do we want to hire? Like, what are good ways to hire? And how can we automate that without having these kinds of problems? Like, I hope that maybe some more vendors do maybe VR testing, sort of virtual reality where you put people actually doing the job into like the sort of the most pertinent things about the job. Maybe that might be possible. We can't hire en masse and like let people go after a month or 2 months and we checked if they're good at their job or not. But like, could we do something like that with virtual reality? I think there could be great applications of algorithms. In fact, I built an AI tool for journalists to help us with documents and freedom of information requests. Like, I think I started this research because AI is a transformational technology. But what I found is like, makes me feel like there are certain applications that it really hasn't worked out like we wanted it to work out. For some reason. Oh, I think you.
I was muted. Yes. Thank you again. This was very, very helpful conversation to all of us. I think very practical. And as I said, there will be a discount on Hilke's book. And I think we're all going to stay connected because I'm sure this will prompt you to continue to do more research in this space. And I do think that our profession in HR is certainly going through a transformation that we have not probably experienced before the internet. So I think the opportunities for all of us to improve what we are doing are tremendous, and we need to focus there and see how we can provide input to our more technology colleagues at the same time as we are developing those skills ourselves. You know, what I love about these technologies, and we are actually beginning to introduce you know, co-pilot type of development for our students in HR through our human capital analytics and technology program. To your point, they're becoming more and more user-friendly and easier to create on our own. And that's where there is a danger there, obviously, but at the same time, there's also an opportunity. So thank you so much, Hilke. Please stay in touch with us. Our next, Renee, we want to show our next presentations in the series of Rethinking Work. Thank you all who joined us. As you can see, we are going to have a few of our own faculty. Woody Woodward and myself just published a book on digital coaching revolution, where we will be addressing some of those issues as well. We have our own Mary Ciani, whose book was published this week on consultants experience, Consultants Compass with Mary Ciani. And in May, we're going to have again our own faculty, Beverly Taruli, with her book, edited book on insights in strategic workforce planning. And all of these questions will be coming up again in the context of more specific applications, like what Dr. Woody and I explored in the digital coaching domain, as well as in the consultant space and strategic workforce planning. That's exactly what Hilke referred to as skills-based type of approach to hiring, planning, et cetera. So all of these really important issues for HR. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Stay tuned. Hilke, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was delightful. I'm so glad.
And I'm glad. This is all very refreshing because we also didn't have PowerPoint slides because we're usually so tied down to PowerPoint slides. This was a very dynamic conversation. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.